Hello and thanks for watching. My name is Angel Vilar and I am a systems engineer at VMware. On this video we are going to see how to leverage vRealize Network Insight to get advanced visibility into the data center. So just think for a moment how much time would it take you to get a list of VMs and their IP addresses in your data center? Or how much time would it take you to determine what are the active services in the network? Or how would you calculate the bandwidth consumption from VMs to the physical infrastructure or to the internet, for example? Or do you have any visibility on the performance and consumption of CPU, memory and disk of your VMs? Do you have a clear view and understanding of how much free space do you have in all your data stores? And when connecting data centers with NSX, do you have any idea of how much bandwidth is in use? And when troubleshooting a physical issue, how much time does it take you to determine the switch ports that drop more traffic or send more broadcast? Do you have a way to determine how many VMs run a specific operating system and the connections they establish? And finally, are you capable of determining which are the top talkers in your infrastructure? Well, on this video we are going to see how vRealize Network Insight will help us answering these questions very quickly. But before we start, let's do a quick refresher. vRealize Network Insight is an analytics and operations tool that provides visibility across virtual and physical networks. It helps when planning micro-segmentation because it provides recommendations on firewall rules to be applied, and it also can be used to make sure that these rules are enforced as expected. Network Insight also provides visibility and correlation of events across virtual and physical networks. So for example, you can see if your physical switch is dropping packets, or you can see the step-by-step path traffic follows across both virtual and physical networks. Finally, it also provides information on the health and availability of your NSX deployment, ensuring best practices are being followed, as well as providing recommendations when issues are detected. I won't go into further details on this video because I already covered vRNI in a previous one, and there are also very good materials from the VMware Cloud Management Business Unit available. And of course, you can always try Network Insight by yourself on the VMware hands-on labs. So let's go for the topic of this video, advanced visibility. I'm going to use a lab based on Network Insight version 3.3, and be aware that things may vary if you are using a different one. So let's answer the first question. How much time would it take you to get a list of VMs on your data center and their IP addresses? Using Network Insight, you simply need to type the information you want to get. So let's type VLAN, comma, IP address, comma, default gateway of VMware VMs. And it's very easy to type the query because, as you have seen, fields are auto-completing. And in just a few seconds we get a list of our VMs with their default gateway, VLANs, their specific IP address, and many other VM related information. Of course, we can export all this information into a CSV file so it can be further analyzed with other tools or sent to other people on the team. And we can repeat the same query, but now instead of VLAN we can use VXLAN. So we will see to which NSX networks our VMs connect. So here the first ones, they don't have a specific default gateway because they are routers. So we can see they have multiple network addresses and they connect to multiple logical switches, but if we scroll down, then we start seeing end user VMs. And here we go, we have the logical switch, which is the VXLAN network, default gateway, the network IP address, and also the detail of the specific IP address of the VM, which again we can export it into a CSV file. So once we know what are the VMs in our environment, how do we know what are the active services in the network? So again, we simply need to type the information we want on Network Insight. So flows grouped by port. But this time we don't want to know the flows, but we want to know the sum of bytes of those flows as well as the average of bytes on those flows. So we hit enter and we get a list of the ports that are receiving connections in our network. And not only that, but also we can see how many flows and the amount of traffic that we are receiving on each port. If we want to find out which servers are receiving those connections, we simply need to type service endpoint, and we get a list of IP addresses and ports that are receiving connections in our network. We will now repeat our previous query, sum bytes of flows, but instead of grouping by port, we will now group by service endpoint. We will receive similar information, only that now we can see the number of flows and the amount of traffic received by each IP address and port instead of by each port only. Okay, so we now have visibility on the active services on the network, but how we do know what is the bandwidth consumption from VMs to the physical or from VMs to the internet? So again, since the user interface of Network Insight is very easy and intuitive, we just simply need to type the information we want. Flows, where flow type equals, and then we have multiple options like east-west, VM to physical, destination is physical, traffic is routed, traffic is broadcast, traffic is between VMs, traffic goes to the internet. We will start by finding out what are the flows that go from our VMs to the physical infrastructure. We hit enter, and in just a few seconds we get the list of flows going from our VMs to physical devices, which again is information we could export into a CSV file. Having the list of flows is good, but let's say we want to know how much traffic those flows involve, so let's add sum bytes of flows at the beginning of the query. And in just a few seconds we can see we have almost 6 gigabytes of traffic going from our VMs to the physical infrastructure during a specified period of time, which by default is 24 hours. Of course, we can modify it for troubleshooting, so we can compare these statistics against the statistics we have yesterday, the week before, or at a specified point in time. And we can also refine the query so that we find additional information. So let's go back to our initial flows, where flow type is VM to physical, and now let's add at the end and destination port equals 53. So in this way we will get a list of flows of traffic going from our VMs to the DNS server, and again we can add at the beginning sum bytes of flows, so we can see how much traffic are we sending from the VMs to the DNS server. Just a few seconds and we get the answer. Finally, let's see how to get the same information, bandwidth consumption from VMs to physical, on a per host basis. For that, we enter the query flows where flow type equals VM physical group by source host. We hit enter, and we have our list of hosts with the number of flows each one is sending to the physical environment. Again, we can get consolidated information, so we can add sum bytes of flows at the beginning, so that we have a clear view of how much bandwidth each host consumes. Let's now move to the next question, how to get the list of top talkers in our infrastructure. So again, we simply need to ask Network Insight. In this case, we ask for the flows grouped by source virtual machine, ordered by the sum of bytes, and limited to 10, so we get the 10 top talkers. Just wait for a few seconds and we get the list of the 10 VMs that produce more traffic in our infrastructure, together with the number of flows and the amount of traffic they produced. Let's now see how to find out information about the amount of resources VMs consume. Network Insight provides information about other resources, so for example it's very easy to get a list of CPU usage and memory usage for all the VMware VMs on the environment. We just enter the query of VMware VM and hit enter. And in a few seconds we get a list of all our VMs, and we get information about the memory and CPU utilization for each and every of them. But we can also get consolidated information. So for example, we can add the keyword average at before CPU usage and before memory usage. We need to add brackets as well. We hit enter, and then we get information about the average CPU and memory consumption for all our VMs. And in case we are troubleshooting issues for one specific VM, We can add its name at the end of the query, hit enter, and we get the same information related to this specific VM. We can also replace average with max so that we get the maximum value for these metrics for this VM. And we can move back and forth in time to compare the current values with the same metrics at a specific point in the past. In a similar way, we can get read and write latency information for our VMs. So we just enter write latency, comma, read latency, which is auto-completed, of VMware VM, and hit enter. And in a few seconds we get the list of our VMs with specific information about read and write latency. As we did before, we can get consolidated information using the average keyword and the brackets. So we put avg brackets and hit enter again, and we get the average read and write latency for the VMs in our environment. As before, we can narrow down this information to a specific VM by simply adding its name at the end of the query. And again, we can replace average by max to get the read and write maximum latency for our VM. And as before, we can navigate in time to compare these results with the same metrics at a specific point in time. Let's see next how to find out the flows for specific VMs based on their operating system. For a start, we will ask Network Insight to give us a list of VMs where their operating system is like one of the ones that have been discovered, in this case Microsoft Windows Server 2003. We hit enter and we get the list of VMs running this specific operating system. And how do we get the flows for those VMs? We are going to use a feature called application that allows us to define custom applications. In this case there is one already set, which is a vRealize OS-based app. We click on it and we can see it has three tiers. One tier is based on CentOS, which groups all VMs that run CentOS operating systems, in our case 6 VMs. Here we get the list. And then I also have a Windows tier, which groups all VMs running any kind of Windows operating system, more than 400 VMs in the environment. This is the list, which we could export into a CSV file. We click on Save, and next we are going to use this information on the Plan Security feature. So on the left hand side of the widget, we can group flows by application, and now we can see my application is there, VLAR, and we can see the flows that come in and out of my app. So for example, if I click on this loop, I can see the flows between the elements in my application, and I can also see the recommended rules to provide micro-segmentation inside my application. So using Network Insight, it's very easy to start micro-segmentation projects on existing environments. I can also group flows by tier instead of by application, and I can get the same kind of information but now for each tier on my app. So for example, if I click on the loop for my Windows tier, I will get the flows between the Windows VMs in my app. Let's now see how to get the storage-specific information from Network Insight. This time we will ask the system to give us a list of data stores ordered by free space. And in just a few seconds we get the list of all the data stores in the environment ordered by free space as requested. And again, we can export this information into a CSV file. Network Insight also provides a very interesting storage dashboard by simply typing storage on the text box. And here we get consolidated information about all the storage options in our environment. VMFS data stores, NFS data stores, VMs on each of the data stores, information about the snapshots, performance metrics, etc. And now back to the network, let's see how much bandwidth would be consumed when extending networks with NSX across data centers. So for that, we will ask Network Insight to give us the list of flows where the source manager is the NSX manager on data center 1 and the destination manager is the NSX manager on data center 2. Hit enter and we get the list of flows managed by NSX between data centers. In this case it's very short because this is a lab environment, but it's good enough for demo purposes. But this information is one way only, so let's see how to manipulate the query to get information on both ways, on the flows that go both ways between data centers. So we need to add a few brackets, to use the operator OR, and to enter the same manager information but now on the reverse order. So now the source will be the destination and the destination will be the source. We hit enter and we get the information, which in our case is exactly the same as before because, as I said, this is a lab environment. Once again, we can get consolidated info by adding some bytes of at the beginning of the query and hitting enter. So now we can see the amount of bandwidth consumed by NSX environments across data centers. And again, we can navigate back and forth in time to compare these metrics with the values at some other point in time. Let's now see how to get visibility of what's going on with our physical network. So let's ask Network Insight for a list of switch ports where the vendor is Cisco Systems, ordered by the number of packet drops they have, because we know they have packet drops and we want to troubleshoot it. As you can see, we can get information about multiple network metrics and traffic types like broadcast or multicast, but for the demo we will focus on the total number of packet drops. We hit enter and we get the list of ports in descending order, meaning the ones with more packet drops will be on top. We can expand the widget so we can get more details on the specific ports we are troubleshooting. Let's now change network vendor and let's see some information about Arista switches. For example, we can get a list of switch ports for Arista ordered by MTU size. So in this way we can see which MTU is configured on the Arista ports. We get now a list in ascending order. So on top we have the management interfaces with 1500 MTU set, but as soon as we get Ethernet ports, we can see they are using jumbo frames, so NSX will run perfectly on top of them. Finally, let's see how to use negations in the queries, because sometimes it's very useful. So let's start by getting a list of all the VMs in our environment. As you can see, there are many of them whose name start with admin. So let's now filter those, so we will tell the system VMs where name is not like admin. We hit enter and the admin VMs disappear from our list. As always, if required, we can export the list into a CSV file. Still, we have many VMs whose name start with CBU, so let's get rid of those two by appending and name not like CBU into our query. We hit enter and the CBU VMs are gone. Let's now see how to do something similar with IP addresses. So let's get a list of flows in the environment. As we can see, there are many of them on the 10.17 range. So let's filter those out by using flows where IP address is not like 10.17.0.0/16. Hit enter and the list of flows is reduced and the 10.17 flows are not there anymore. Let's see how to leverage this on the plan security, on the plan flows feature. Let's sort the flow information by IP subnet instead of VXLAN to make things clearer. And here we can see there are plenty 10.17 networks. So let's see how to filter those out so that we can focus on what we are looking for. So plan flows where IP address is not like 10.17.0.0/16. Hit enter, and we can see the information has been reduced. If we order it by subnet, we can see there are no 10.17 networks, so we can now focus on analyzing the flows and the micro-segmentation rules for this specific range of IP addresses. And this concludes the demo. So remember, VMware is a key enabler for the digital era, because with NSX we provide better security that is intrinsic to the infrastructure. We can also provide the streamlined operations, as we have just seen with vRealize Network Insight, and at the end of the day, VMware provides a complete platform for advanced network and security. I hope you have enjoyed, and don't forget to check my YouTube channel where this and many other NSX demos are uploaded. Thank you.